From the moment I began Egghead, I was cautiously optimistic. And not because something felt off. In fact, I described its beginning as refreshingly traditional last week. I was joyous over getting the crew back together for another exciting adventure. However, as the story continued, battles unfolded, and a mystery was established, that cautious concern within me transformed into something far more serious. I began to think to myself, is One Piece's ending going to fall flat? With all of these complicated protagonists, antagonists, rivals, supporting players, and villains all circulating the pages of One Piece's story, with all of their own independent stories going on that need to be resolved, how could Oda possibly craft a satisfying ending worthy of One Piece by writing an arc with the same structure as all the others as we approach the finish line? When so many other incredible and complicated stories have crumbled beneath the weight of their own ambition, unable to resolve or address the countless narrative threads they introduced, how could Oda possibly tie all of these threads together when others in similar positions have yielded disastrous results? I'll tell you how. Because I am wrong. Egghead isn't traditional. In fact, Egghead is unlike anything this story has ever done before. This arc isn't about Luffy or the Strawhats. This arc, in addition to reconfiguring and solidifying the new world order, simultaneously attempts to establish the final order upon which the endgame of One Piece is set to play out. No longer concerned with the stories of Kaido, Big Mom, or the minor players of Wano, Egghead has positioned Luffy as an illustrious Emperor of the Sea. And while this is cool, okay, very cool, on a narrative level, it effectively enables Oda to dramatically and, most importantly, narratively narrow the focus of this story. No longer do we have to concern ourselves with the lesser conflicts of the wider world directly. The exhaustively broad scope of One Piece's world is now instead compartmentalized and represented by several elite central figures for Luffy to interact with. Entities that are deeply tied to his past, his central themes, the ultimate conclusion of this story, and most vitally at this juncture, entities that can tie up the loose ends of several plot threads, all the while Luffy deals with the world government. This approach primes all storylines for eventual convergence, expertly communicating that as much as One Piece has been Luffy's story, the final prize is still very much all to play for. You could even say it's winner takes all. I love this fight. I love it so much. When I saw an entire episode was deviating last week from the main story, it gave me whiplash. What do you mean we're getting Law versus Blackbeard with no foreplay? But hey, I ain't complaining. Daddy likes. Blackbeard actively seeks out conflict with Law with zero preparation or consideration for his crew or their abilities. His motivation for engaging in these fights seems to be internally driven, perhaps ego or narcissism. He demands that his crew facilitate these selfish and poorly thought out whims, and through doing so, his crew is hurt by him. I mean, he's the head honcho that people need to worry about on his crew, and so therefore perhaps he assumes tackling Law one-on-one was the best approach. In this battle, he refers to Law and his crew as prey and constantly reiterates that there's no escape, suggesting that he believes there's only one logical response to his presence: to run. But unfortunately for Blackbeard, that is not how Law operates. Virtually every order Law issues to his crew is for their collective protection and strategy. Our only choice is to keep going. We're surfacing to the land northeast of here, even if we have to fight pirates like them. Everything Law says in this battle is brimming with genuine leadership quality, whereas conversely, Blackbeard treats battle like a party, referring to those in his follow as scallywags, and even declares, "I'm taking all the road poneglyphs for myself." That's the difference between a tyrant and a leader. Blackbeard's crew serves him and him alone, all the while Law serves his crew, emphasizing that no one member is more valuable than the collective, with the contrast only becoming more evident as the battle commences. Much the same as Law's initial orders were, his first active move in this battle isn't offensive. It's to reverse the effects of the Sick fruit from both himself and his crew. And once the battle finally gets underway and into full swing, while all of Blackbeard's crew seem to be free stalling their approach with virtually no oversight from their captain, Law's crew doesn't advance until their captain issues the order, even if the land atop which their feet find footing start to bend and crumble beneath them. They do not move unless instructed to. That is loyalty, that is trust, and that is genuine leadership. They literally take a bullet for him. To someone like Blackbeard, this might appear as though the weak are gathering around the strong for survival, validating his focus on Law and cementing his disregard for the weaklings around him. But this is Blackbeard's fundamental flaw. He only thinks about himself. It isn't until Law issues the order does he actively focus his efforts on attack. This is what Blackbeard wants. He wants to see how Law measures up to him. Everything is about his dream, his goals, his treasure. And the most telling part of all is as soon as things start to go against his way, his first response is to blame his crew. Quote, "Nobody told me he could do that." He says this right after witnessing Stronger getting sliced in half and as Doc Q falls to a possibly watery grave. There's zero consideration for others, and the worst part is, even his crew sees that for what it is. Everything about his crew's approach seems to serve as whatever it is he haphazardly decides to do at a moment's notice. However, through this single-minded and ego-driven approach, Blackbeard reveals his greatest weakness. Through only focusing on attack, and certain the natural response to those weaker than him is to run away. I mean, after all, his entire crew reflects the strength value here. Having scoured the globe in search of the strongest devil fruit abilities, they have formed a team that is all but invincible, demigods that strike fear into the hearts of those they prey upon, but Law and his crew are not prey. The very quality that makes Blackbeard's pirates fearsome has become the target which Law's crew hopes to exploit. Now left totally uncontested and virtually defenseless thanks to their captain's inconsiderate approach, I don't know what's worse, the fact that Blackbeard's carelessness caused this, or the fact that he doesn't seem to care one way or the other. Because for Blackbeard, victory is seldomly more complicated than raising his left hand. In that instant, the tides shift, and the Heart Pirates are facing annihilation. It's at this point the consequences of such a defeat become apparent. Law's Op fruit is powerful and valuable. Perhaps Teach wants it for himself. However, this is the moment the final play of this cruel duel reveals itself. Unable to move, Law is saved thanks to the heroic actions of Beppo. Erupting from the verge of death with a final gambit that is as successful as it is short, he is unable to save his crew. All Beppo can do is carry his captain away from danger. As Law drifts in and out of consciousness, he utters the first sentence in this entire battle where his focus seems to be on himself and himself alone. I cannot leave my crew behind. In that moment, Law assumes all the responsibility from Beppo's choice. Up until the final moments of the Heart Pirates, their captain, Trafalgar Law's devotion and love for them did not waver once. The Heart Pirates have been defeated. Before we move on to the next part of this crazy sci-fi world though, it's time to become eggheads ourselves with some language learning. Rosetta Stone has been an invaluable partner over these past few months, and I am beyond excited to be able to offer you guys over 60% off their lifetime subscription. After my time in Japan, I've been trying really hard to improve the Japanese I picked up there, not just so I can watch anime without subtitles, though let's be real, that's a big part of it, but to actually understand the language in a way that really sticks in my brain also. Dry textbooks just don't cut it for my ADHD self. Rosetta Stone uses an approach called dynamic immersion, which basically means you're learning the language the way you naturally would if you were living in Japan. Rather than memorizing endless word lists or running through a bunch of grammar tests, you're learning through context clues, visuals, and listening. To me, that's been so much more useful for my long-term retention. The true accent feature in particular is a blessing for someone like me, who seemingly can't go through a review like this without messing up a Japanese word or two. Or 3. It compares your accent against the native speakers while you're learning, so I get to know immediately if I mess something up, which is sure a lot friendlier than the comments I get over my insane pronunciation sometimes.
Juice.
Juice. And hey, Japanese is just one of 25 languages you can dive into with Rosetta Stone. So whether you've got travel plans coming up or you're just in the mood to enhance your anime viewing experience, now's a great time to jump in. As I said, we're offering you 60% off lifetime subscriptions, so hit that link in the description or scan the QR code on screen. Whatever's easier, you know the drill. When it dawned on me that Shanks was an Elbaf and Kid was heading straight towards him, completely unflinching and eager for conflict, mind you, it became clear that, despite different circumstances, analyzing this battle closely would offer equally insightful nuggets for me to enjoy. So, what exactly is Oda trying to show us here in this battle between Shanks and Kid? Well, interestingly, despite Shanks being a fellow Emperor of the Sea, this confrontation couldn't present him in a more starkly different light from Blackbeard. Without even speaking, Shanks' relationship with his crew, fleet, and allies communicates more about his character than any monologue ever could. Blackbeard's crew is intimate but immensely powerful, defined by ruthless individualistic strength. Shanks' allies, meanwhile, are numerous yet comparatively weaker, emphasizing unity and collective strength over raw individual power. What's immediately striking here, though, is Kid's antagonistic stance, sharply contrasted by Shanks' attempt to offer him a chance to reconsider. Now, condescending as that may initially sound, it genuinely comes from concern, not only to spare Kid's dreams, but to also prevent Elbaf from suffering collateral damages. The build-up to this confrontation itself further emphasizes this difference between them. While Law and Blackbeard clearly recognize the strategic importance of defeating one another, Kid and Shanks both appear somewhat distracted, albeit in very different ways. Kid arrogantly looks past Shanks, believing his opponent's identity is irrelevant as he intends to crush anyone who stands before him. All the while, Shanks is caught up wondering about a recent irregularity he can't quite make sense of. Why didn't Blackbeard go to Wano? Now that's an interesting question, but that doesn't matter because within Shanks' contemplative state, a certain mechanical menace quickly snaps him to attention. Holy shit! Like, I'm not exaggerating when I say this, but in that moment, with Shanks seemingly caught off guard, I genuinely thought we were witnessing the toppling of the old world order as we knew it. I mean, how could I not? I literally just saw Kid sink about 8 of Shanks' ships in mere seconds. The sheer destructive power was electrifying and chilling into and of itself, but the consequences of such a victory here would literally shake the story's foundations. However, this isn't the end of Shanks' story. In fact, it's quite the opposite. It's a demonstration of the very power that's seen him to where he is today and the philosophy that's guided him there. You see, right before the attack, Shanks delivered this line, and I quote, "Don't underestimate how fast youngsters grow up." This, I believe, is the fundamental difference between Shanks and Blackbeard. Blackbeard obsesses about himself and his future, while Shanks is genuinely invested in the potential of others, even those who directly challenge and threaten him from younger generations. But make no mistake, this does not mean Shanks can't keep his own eyes fixed firmly on the future. Thanks to his advanced observation hockey, Shanks foresees Kid's devastating attack and acts accordingly, brilliantly saving his fleet from obliteration. Experiencing this future sight alongside Shanks not only showcases his extraordinary strength, but also validates Kid's lethal potential in a weird way. It's a narrative masterstroke that grants both characters respect without undermining either one of them. It's a challenging feat to pull off, especially given how brutally the encounter ends. Delivering a single, decisive strike, Shanks single-handedly annihilates Kid's ship and brings the battle to a thunderous, if not quick, conclusion, underlining the immense gap in both power and the approach taken between these two pirates. Comparing this to Law's earlier battle with Blackbeard gave me tremendous insight into these characters' inner workings, highlighting a beautifully deliberate parallel crafted by Oda, I think. Shanks' characterization here might just be the most consistent writing I've seen in this story, maybe? His defensive approach mirrors perfectly his original encounter with the bandits in Chapter 1, where Kid now takes on the role of those very bandits. Shanks goes out of his way to avoid conflict until he's given no choice but to act and end the fight as quickly as possible for those that depend on it. On the other hand, Kid mirrors Blackbeard's reckless aggression, charging ahead despite clear opportunities to withdraw, ultimately facing catastrophic defeat. Law, like Shanks, approaches battle patiently, strategically, and defensively, capitalizing on his opponent's overconfidence. It's an incredibly well-written sequence. I mean, after Wano, 3 pirates with incredible potential set out to reshape the world. But now, only one of them, only one dream remains intact. And that's only because his fight is yet to even begin. However, and this is a big however, through analyzing these 2 fights, I think I may have just discovered 2 weaknesses in the victorious pirates Shanks and Blackbeard. Weaknesses that I think Luffy and the Straw Hats themselves, notably, do not share. However, I will say that I don't have all the necessary information yet, so don't crucify me if I end up being wrong. Blackbeard's blind spot is his ego and philosophy. Driven by passion to achieve his goal, his ruthless methods will inevitably lead to his downfall, I think. His crew are not friends or comrades, they're merely strong individuals bound by power. When his power eventually falters, I think Blackbeard's crew's loyalty will fall into question. A question I don't think Blackbeard personally wants the answer to. Luffy, by contrast, is supported by genuine bonds of friendship and trust. Should Luffy ever falter, Zoro, Robin, or any other Straw Hat will readily step in until he recovers. Conversely, Shanks might have the opposite issue. The gap between his power and the rest of his crew could be far wider than that of the Straw Hats, though for sure that's hard to say. Although undeniably strong, compared to the Straw Hats as a cohesive unit, my theory is that they may fall short in that regard. And when it comes to sheer determination to realize one's dream, Luffy's drive is unmatched in the entire series. To defeat Luffy, one must crush his team and his spirit in equal measure. Shanks, characterized by his reverence for the next generation and a desire to avoid unnecessary conflict, may not be willing or able to go that far. I mean, I don't personally think he's gone as far as to kill Kid in this attack. Do you? This insight is precisely why seeing everyone reunited at the beginning of this arc thrilled me so much. United, the Straw Hat Pirates stand, I think, unparalleled. Not Big Mom, not Kaido, not Blackbeard, not Shanks, and certainly not the world government can hope to stop them if they are united as one. However, with all of this talk of pirates, I think it's time to explore the other players in this narrative. Players that, in my opinion, could be even more interesting if you believe that. Just as Law and Kid represent alternate paths within Luffy's generation, attempting and failing to surpass the existing regime, what follows next serves as a thoughtful exploration of 2 possible lives Luffy could have led if his journey had taken a different turn. While all of these secondary adventures concerning Blackbeard, Shanks, Sabo, and Kobe in this instance highlight and expand our understanding of these characters as well as advance their respective tales, my favorite aspect of this approach is how all of these scenes offer the secondary benefit of complementing Luffy's already complicated character and adventure without him even being on screen once. Where Blackbeard and Shanks represent where Luffy's path will ultimately lead him, Sabo and Kobe represent the alternate paths or lives Luffy could have lived had he followed the dreams of his patriarchs and not himself. Like Luffy, both Kobe and Sabo embrace the beating heart of their respective worlds, the Navy and the Revolutionary Army. And through their respective eyes, the worlds they inhabit and encounter are opened up to us in ways we've seldom seen before. And in some cases, ways we've never seen before. Within this story, both Kobe and Sabo exit by way of escape. However, the contents of each segment tells us something not just about them, but the heroes they look up to and hope to embody in the future. First of all, Perona hype. Woo! I just had to throw that in there. Perona is one of my editor's favorite characters in the entire story. You're welcome.
Why, that's very good. Yes, I like that.
For me, however, I'm hugely interested in seeing how a character under pressure reacts, as these moments are where we see who they really are. Wappo might talk a big game, but faced with danger, he crumbles into a coward. Usopp might seem like a coward, but when the chips are down, he can be depended on like few others in this story. And in the case of Kobe's character, even when behind bars of the same terrifying tyrant that obliterated law or confronted by an angry mob trying to kill him, his first port of call isn't his own safety, it isn't revenge. His first priority, without hesitation and with great cost to himself, is to facilitate the escape of innocent people. No matter how many times different characters might recant the adventures of Kobe or refer to him by his new nickname, Kobe the Hero, nothing can emblazon a heroic quality upon a character more powerfully than the simple gesture of an altruistic sacrifice offered up in the face of tremendous danger. That is a hero. It seems the little kid, terrified to step out of his oppressor's shadow in those opening chapters, has fully realized himself. Today, we can see finally the person Luffy saw all those years ago, and we're not the only one. I've always found Garp to be a fascinating and conflicted character. His ideals are righteous, he's a powerful hero to all Marines, and his dedication to fostering the next generation is to be admired. Holding a deep respect for Kobe and the potential he holds for the Navy's future, these are all terrific qualities one normally sees in a hero. But just like any other great character worth exploring, it isn't long before the elements of poison start to emerge from beneath the cracks of his aging facade. He helped to raise Luffy and Ace when their parents abandoned them, but entirely rejected their respective paths due to the flags they eventually flew. He stands for the righteous ideals of protection against great evils, to uphold peace in the face of the world's horrors, and yet he allowed Ace to die and almost lost Luffy in the process, all because he made a vow to protect Marineford. You might ask, what kind of man could do this? How can he be behind so much of this story's good while simultaneously being responsible for some of the most heartless actions in the entire series? Well, for the exact same reasons Kobe wanted to join the Marines in the first place. From the first arc we meet Kobe, we are shown everything we need to know about him, particularly in the moment he mentions Captain Morgan's name. People around him shudder in fear, and some even run away, leading us to question why he was roaming free while someone like Zoro was strung up. The purpose, of course, for all of this is to highlight the moral complexity of One Piece's world. With the evil Captain Morgan representing everything Kobe thought he wanted to be, it places Kobe into a difficult position. Does he abandon his dream or pursue it regardless of the difficulties? The beauty of this scene being that we all know what he would choose to do. After vowing never to bow down to tyrants ever again, Kobe enlists not because he thinks the Navy is a flawless bastion of paragon and hope, but because he wishes to stand up for the ideals he wants it to have. This, I think, is where Kobe shares the most in common with Garp. To him, the Navy represents something important. It's a bastion of hope and peace for the world and its people. And through his decades of tireless service to that institution, he became an heroic figure for all Marines and people around the world to look up to and aspire to be. If during Marineford that symbol were to become a traitor, it's easy to see where Garp's mind might wander to. Would the world lose faith in the Navy? Would the world suddenly start to plunge into chaos? Whether you agree with him or not, it's a terrible situation to find yourself within. And I think that's why Garp risks everything here to save Kobe, because he isn't burdened like he is. All alone, Kobe was the only man with the strength of character necessary to stand before Akainu and say, "That's enough." It is a thunderously powerful moment that's brimming with the same passion he and Luffy shared in their adventure's beginnings. Because to this new generation, the world they grew up in has never been black and white or good versus evil. It's never been as simple as family or not family. For the likes of Kobe and Luffy, it's never been pirate versus marine. It's quite simply right versus wrong. While all of Kobe's peers might express jealousy towards Garp's blatant favoritism of him, it is that lone trait, that strength of character, to stand up for the Navy's ideals that makes Kobe the single most important component of the Navy's future. With Luffy's first friend after leaving his home, Kobe, filling the void Luffy left behind in his grandpa's life, and his brother Sabo becoming everything Luffy's father wished he could have been and more, a shining beacon of resistance, a flame emperor standing in defiance against the oppressive world government, you need look no further for evidence of this than when Dragon is asked if he'd like to know more about Luffy's current circumstance. He simply responds with, "I've heard more than enough on that subject." And yet when the topic of Sabo comes into focus, so too does Dragon's attention. And look, I fully plan on getting into the fucking insane reveals that happen later in this section. Trust me, I will. But I think before I do, it's important to point out that all the moments that define Dragon and Garp's respective admiration for these two proteges are precisely the lessons and inspirations they took from the time they spent with Luffy. Whether they wanted to be the case or not, they both stand for what Luffy represents. They just don't know it yet. The lead up to what eventually follows this is as I anticipated it largely. Sabo spearheads an attack alongside his forces on the holy land of Marijoa. The primary reason behind Sabo's mission, of course, is to free Kuma from his tortured bonds. Please, for the love of God, stop hitting him. We all know he succeeds in this venture, but that is far from the most interesting element of this mission, and it is here King Cobra of Alabasta rejoins the story, and most interestingly, he calls a meeting with the 5 elders in the name of getting answers to a couple of questions he recently uncovered. His final words to Pell before entering the throne room, never to exit again, are to watch over his daughter, Vivi. But who gives a shit about all that educational mumbo jumbo? I do. I care deeply about it, so please. Now it's time for the main event! After thousands of chapters and episodes, after decades of only getting breadcrumbs to satiate our curiosity, Sabo and Cobra, these Giga Chads, help to expose the for what it truly is. Not a symbol of humility, but of totalitarianism. And worst of all, someone sits on it. Get off the beach! That's right, it's time we finally get around to talking about Imu substantially. No, not the fucking bird, the guy, or the girl maybe? Honestly, the more of this Imu I see, the more they start to look like a little girl. Am I crazy? I can't be the only one to see this, right? Like, imagine Robin as a child wearing a comically large crown, wearing a veil, I don't know. That's what I see. Her eyes are the same shape as Robin's and Vivi's too, so that might tell us something. With that said, they also appear to be a shapeless shadow monster that consumes all, so that could very well discredit everything I just said. My brain is honestly fried after all this juicy information I just absorbed, and it will take some time to fully synthesize, but did I hear all of that right? Vivi's a fucking celestial dragon? I think I'm going to be sick. Okay, no, actually no, that's bad mark, bad mark. The whole point of One Piece and the mistakes characters like Garp and Dragon are making is to emphasize and drive home the message that neither your race, your passion, or your job determine the quality of who you are. It is what you do with the powers you have and the limits on those powers you set that determines your quality. What an incredibly important and thematically resonant revelation. But more specifically on the topic of Imu, one of the coolest creative choices I thought in this entire sequence was to have Imu voluntarily reveal themselves as soon as Cobra asked too many questions. By virtue of Imu showing up for Cobra to see in the flesh, that was the signal to all 5 dragons in the room and to us sitting on the edge of our seats at home that Cobra's fate was sealed. Out of all the crazy reveals and explicit violence on display, my favorite part might just be one of the most subtle elements of this exchange. When Imu's name was revealed to Cobra, he seemed to already be familiar with it. To me, this says that Imu could very well be from the Void Century itself. You see, during his inquiry, Cobra explained that he formed these questions based on what he had read from the histories of Alabasta over the last 800 years. Now, this is a hunch, of course, but perhaps Imu's name is featured in that history book to some capacity. Perhaps he's a timeless, shapeless creature that sits at the nucleus of this entire mystery. And perhaps the information contained in the libraries of Alabasta could shed some light on further specifics concerning their origin. It would explain the old-fashioned way with which Imu chooses to speak too. And look, okay, there's a lot to unpack here concerning this exchange and this subsequent action from Imu, because he did not like what Cobra had to say here concerning his ancestors' lineage, even going as far as to question whether or not these troublesome poneglyphs were an accident or something intentional. This is what leads to that infamous letter exiting Cobra's mouth and, you know, the subsequent shish kebab. As it happens, the D, or Will of D, is effectively the big fat middle finger to Imu. So much so that upon learning that even these poneglyphs were released onto the world from someone brandishing the Will of D, it served as a breaking point for him. Anyone with any association to that letter must die. It isn't who you're related to so much as it is what you stand for. And the Will of D, according to Imu, stands as an affront to everything he represents.
Oh, D! まさか世界のてっぺんに地獄があるとは。
Holy fuck, holy fuck, holy fuck. Sabo versus Imu, it's happening. It's fucking happening. Wait, no. What's happening? Did Imu and the Celestial Dragons just turn into shadow monsters? What do their shapes even... They're like different animals. Leave it to Oda to answer a boatload of my questions, and in the process leave me with countless more to ponder. When this scene came to an end and the scope of Cobra's sacrifice comes into focus, the first thought that popped into my head was of contempt for the likes of Dragon. We've already explored how antiquated Garp's view of the world is, but it seems Dragon isn't very different either. Upon the revelation of this story to Dragon, he acknowledges Cobra's good nature, but ultimately celebrates his death as a win for the revolution due to his technical association with the world government prior. These are the sensibilities of an extremist, and while his mission may be virtuous, his means will harbor nothing but contempt and ensure the wheel of hatred continues to spin for generations to come. And while Sabo's #1 priority is the revolution, it's clear he too saw the immense good in Cobra as a leader and fully appreciates the sacrifice he made for their shared effort. Oh my god, no, okay. Sweet baby Jesus, please no. Don't tell me the character I detested the most on a creative and personal level is going to be an unintentional hero. I can't believe this is happening. But I guess it's all in the name of remaining true to the original central thesis of this arc, that it doesn't matter what label you wear or what title you have, everyone has the ability to do the right thing, even if in this case it's entirely by accident. Alright, so before we move on to the next segment of the story, there is still one additional piece of curiosity I want to explore, and that's this line Imu uttered. He says, "I wish to put Vegapunk's creation to use, the Mother Flame." And with the target revealed to be Lelouchia, even the elders pause or take issue. People live there, but to Imu, that doesn't matter. He chose that location for no other reason than to test this new toy. It is truly a disgusting order, and even though I know this is One Piece, I can't help but feel this dark cloud descend over the story, which might be fitting considering what happens to Lelouchia. Ivankov's theory concerning Imu mirrors my own, which made me feel all kinds of validated, but moreover, had me thinking about the broader themes of One Piece yet again and the implications of such a creature existing in this world, pulling the strings for centuries. The control of information has played a key role in informing all of the stories we've enjoyed through One Piece in the last few decades, with that attempt to control the narrative spilling into characters like Big News Morgan or even someone as virtuous as Sabo. Faced with the opportunity to leverage misinformation for his own gain or to correct the narrative on Lelouchia, Sabo opts to manipulate the narrative even further, and that disappointed me. Within the world of One Piece, knowledge is the most precious resource of all, and if a minor manipulation of the narrative granted so much to Sabo in this instance, imagine what had been made possible for someone like Imu to accomplish, thanks to the lifespan they've enjoyed. Furthermore, when the topic of Vegapunk comes up concerning the weapon that eradicated Lelouchia, Dragon dismisses the notion. And while Imu did say Vegapunk was behind this invention, I do wonder if they are both right. If this had anything to do with the weather controlling tool Vegapunk had been working on. Perhaps the darkness that covered Lelouchia prior to the attack wasn't a weapon, but rather a scientifically engineered cloud.
Meanwhile, in a parallel universe where nobody is called Steve.
In this ensuing fight, the symbolism of Garp using pirates as shields and throwing their flaming cadavers at other pirates isn't exactly subtle. He doesn't deem these individuals worthy of moral consideration, and yet no matter how hard he hits them, that same phantom from his past stands across, staring at him, reminding him that the kid he once pegged as the future of the Navy could choose to take this path. And to make matters worse, the very virtues he so closely guards within Kobe opened that young boy up to certain death. In One Piece, villains' backstories, motivations, they are very rarely simple or shallow, and as Aokiji continues to press Garp in the name of Blackbeard's pirates, an uncomfortable truth comes into focus. Just like Luffy, Aokiji represents a protege Garp lost to the world of the pirates. Garp's first attack against him serves to communicate his feelings exactly. To Garp, one trait is more precious than strength, potential, or skill, and that trait is the courage to stand by the ideals you swore to uphold even in your darkest moments. But as we peek into the history of Aokiji and his time spent with Garp, we learn that what appeared to be cut and dry is far more complicated. His disillusionment didn't arrive due to his defeat from Akainu, it was what that defeat meant for the future of the Navy. Horrified by the fate after befalling the likes of Ohara, Aokiji questioned what the Navy even stood for anymore. A totally rational stance, by the way. Meanwhile, all Garp can do is condemn his son and eventually his grandchild for defecting from his preferred path. Narrow-minded and frustrated, all Garp is left to look at is Aokiji with pride. Living proof that his way can still produce someone worthy of the Navy's ideals, and yet here he is, embodying the antithesis of what he thinks he stands for. The contents of Kobe's flashbacks to his time spent learning under Garp are honestly brilliant. We get a sense of who both of these men are, what they stand for, and most importantly, how they handle pressure. There's one specific scene where Garp is down and all Kobe can do is watch as the island kills everyone he ever tried to save. Unable to make sense of anything, Kobe is about to crumble until he hears Garp's words, "If anyone can save him, it's you guys." I love this because it points a finger not to one individual but a new generation, an idea that Garp can stand behind. This, I think, is why the sword branch of the Navy has come into existence. It stands as the thematic evolution of the Navy's once rigid existence and represents the youth of tomorrow and their ideals. While the Navy as we once knew it under Akainu festers down a dark path, Sword are positioned as unlikely altruistic heroes to check the overreaching arm of the world government if and when it does overreach. Whether that hero is a spoiled brat, a promising upstart, or a once lowly cabin boy with less natural talents than all of them, the greatness within this next generation and the ideals they hold close are exactly what Garp seeks to protect, no matter the cost. In the end, Garp's final lesson is a practical demonstration of his first. Save the youngsters and leave the old man behind. Protect the future and live on. What an incredible legacy. As is commonly the case, Oda pivots this story to an even more fantastical angle, all through clever misdirection. Our reintroduction to this plotline initially seems familiar, picking up right where we left off, receiving York's demands through the perspective of the villains. Safety assurances, celestial dragon status, blah 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 blah. However, after the cavalcade of action, drama, and tension we've just enjoyed through characters like Sabo, Kobe, and Kid, returning to Egghead initially, to me at least, felt like slamming on the narrative brakes, so to speak, which isn't nearly as fun. But thankfully, this pacing shift is entirely by design. Oda wants us to feel just as shocked as the elders when the Strawhats invariably reveal their hand. I absolutely love this creative decision. Instead of resuming directly where we last left off with these characters, Oda allowed the narrative to progress naturally in our absence. The decision expertly establishes the fragile balance holding the Strawhats in place, clearly outlining the practical, physical, and emotional limitations dictating the rules of engagement of the upcoming battle. But before diving into that specifically, I've got some questions. What's the deal with the global earthquake and rising sea levels? Is Imu responsible? Sure seems that way. And if so, how? Why is the Celestial Dragon Elder showing compassion towards Bonnie, yet had no compassion for any of the scientists fleeing the island? Even while he was outlining the mission's core objectives, he specifically states that aside from York, Punk Records, and the power plant, everything else is expendable, signaling that in addition to human lives being insignificant, so too are all the CP agents. Honestly, the whole thing just makes my head hurt. But once their hand is eventually revealed and Luffy grabs the snailophone, his humorous attempt to bargaining actually betrays something fundamental about him, something that I think is rather important to discuss right now. And it's something I've realized sets him apart from nearly every other character in this story. He is honest. Completely so. Previously, I've outlined how characters like Dragon, Sabo, Garp, Big News Morgan, and many others engage in warfare not just through physical means, but through misinformation and dishonesty for personal gain. Here, Robin's urgent insistence on ending the call before Luffy reveals too much explicitly reinforces a key theme that knowledge is power. But this raises an important question, I think. Luffy's honest approach here clearly has short-term drawbacks. I mean, that much is obvious. But across the span of his journey, has his tenacity to be truthful, sometimes even to a fault, actually being the key to his success here? Honesty is typically seen as a weakness by characters in One Piece. Robin, Nami, Usopp lambast Luffy for revealing their weaknesses to the Navy, and understandably so. Yet consider this. Would any of these characters, now ready to fight and die alongside Luffy, have ever reached that level of loyalty had he been anything but completely honest? Zoro? Nami? Usopp? Robin? All of them were won over because Luffy made them promises, and through knowing him, they learned that his promises are never empty. In short, selective honesty, it can't inspire such profound loyalty. Kizaru's involvement in the story carries, I think, significant weight that I had initially not considered. The specific nature of his Devil Fruit ability allows him easy penetration of Egghead's barrier. However, and here's where these crucial rules of engagement come into play, two factors restrain him, one personal and one practical. Personally, Kizaru wishes to honor his history with Sentomaru, and practically speaking, as soon as he breaches the barrier, his subordinates become vulnerable to attack from pacifistas and sea beasts. Casualties would then therefore be inevitable. These limitations and consequences are exactly what makes battles in One Piece so exciting. Yet for me, the most compelling aspect of Kizaru's impending clash with the Strawhats, his presence now threatens to tip the delicate balance of mutual cooperation within this floating fortress. Regarding Rob Lucci's role, my suspicion is that although he's currently allied with the world government and seems like a bit of a dickweed, the heartless, dishonest nature of the Celestial Dragon Elder will inevitably cause him to reconsider, potentially forcing him to switch sides once again as he realizes this mission's success criteria do not include preserving Cypher Pole. I'm willing to bet money on this happening just because it seems to fit in so well with the themes of knowledge is power and all that kind of stuff. Thankfully, Zoro didn't get lost or injured, meaning he's more than sufficient to keep Lucci occupied while Kizaru makes his decisive move towards the Thousand Sunny. Now, due to the traumatic circumstances coloring these memories of Kizaru, various Straw Hats have understandably dreaded another confrontation out loud for us to hear. Like beaten dogs, their initial reaction is fear. Yet before Frankie or anyone else aboard the Sunny could even alert Luffy to that threat, their captain is already moving to intercept. Luffy might not be a good sailor, navigator, chef, doctor, or musician, but when it comes to protecting his friends, there is no one you would rather have on your side. And perhaps, most importantly, Luffy, unlike the rest of his crew, isn't scared in the slightest.
Yeah,
Kizaru! うちの人なら大丈夫よ。坊やたちの100倍強いから。俺たちは2年前の
Oh shit, okay, that cliffhanger sucks. So tune in next week when I catch up with the anime, and with a spoiler warning somewhere in the video, I will alert you all to when we then cut over to the manga only material. I will hopefully finish it next week, so see you then!